I just need to check if the YouTube is working. I'm getting a thumbs up. So good morning, I'm Councillor Richard Butler. I'm the Chairman of the Planning and Right of Way Committee, and welcome along to this meeting, which is our first one of this year. It's for been a while, so welcome everyone. And with me today, we have Councillors Sybil Fielding, who's my Vice Chairman, Councillor Camilleri, Corden, Creamer, Henshaw, Ogle, Owen, Purdue Horan, Sam Smith and Tom Smith. And we also have officers with us as well, planning officers. So if you'd just like to introduce yourselves, please, for the record. Sally.
I'm Sally Gill, Group Manager Planning.
I'm Mike Hankin, Planning Case Officer.
Jonathan Smith, Team Manager, Development Management.
Thank you very much. And Dave Marsh, sorry. It's because you're on the rear row. Sorry about that. I was focusing on the front here, so sorry about that. And do you want the blinds down? No. So we go on to item 1 of the agenda, which are minutes of the previous meeting held on the 14th of December 2021. And are we all, those of us who were here, are we happy that they are correct? Yep, all happy on those. Thank you very much. And do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Williamson and Councillor Meakin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And declarations of interest. Do any members or officers have any disclosable pecuniary interests to declare, and or any private interests, private or pecuniary, to declare? And any interests, anybody? Councillor Sam Smith.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to item 6, my nephew attends Mapley All Stars football coaching.
Thank you very much. We've got that. So do you want any further clarification on that?
I think, well, obviously, I'm sure that Councillor Smith is aware that as long as he is approaching his decision making, as always, with an open mind, then it is a matter for him to decide whether or not he participates in the debate and the vote on that item. Thank you.
He's only 5, so I think I haven't been lobbied hard on that matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
5-year-olds can be very convincing, though, can't they? Right, and we go on to declarations of lobbying. Do any members present have any instances of lobbying to declare? Yes, well, I will start off by saying that I have received lobbying from residents and others who are protesting about the Radcliff incinerator campaign this morning. Do we have any others? Councillor Ogle, I saw your hand.
Item 5, the same, Chairman.
And thank you. And Councillor Owen, same again. And Councillor Camp, is it fair to say that everybody's going to do it? So we all declare lobbying on the first planning item today. Okay, thank you. So that takes us on to our first application today, which is the Emerge Energy from Waste facility at Radcliffe-on-Soar Power Station. We'll start that item now. I'll formally move the recommendation on page 26 of the agenda. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Sybil.
I formally second.
Thank you.
It is about the Emerge Waste Energy Recovery Facility. Members will recall at the 22nd of June 2021 Planning Committee, members resolved to support a grant of planning permission for the Emerge Energy Recovery Facility at Radcliffe-on-Soar Power Station, subject to the applicant entering into a Section 106 legal agreement to regulate lorry routing and the retention of the railhead facility. The Section 106 agreement has now been signed by the applicant and is ready for the council to complete. Where new information becomes available relevant to the assessment of a planning application between the date of the committee decision and the issuing of the decision notice, which could impact on the planning assessment, case law has set out that it is advisable for officers to refer the planning application back to committee so as to ensure that any decision to grant planning permission has been taken with committee being aware of the new matters. Since June 2021, there has been some updates and changes to planning policy, legislation and material consideration which have scope to affect the merits of the original planning decision. These documents include the updated version of the National Planning Policy Framework, the Government's Net Zero Strategy, Build Back Greener, the Environment Act, the publication of the draft Nottinghamshire and Nottingham Joint Waste Local Plan and its supporting waste needs assessment prepared by Aecom Consulting, the Government's consultation on the review of the National Energy Policy Statements, and written representations received from interested parties. This update report focuses on new matters not previously assessed by committee in June, and it supplements the planning appraisal undertaken by the Council and set out within the June 2021 committee report. In the most part, planning officers are satisfied that the new matters that have been identified since the June meeting comprise of updates and previous policy or legislative changes, legislation to enact draft documents without major reform and therefore have not introduced significant new factors. Specifically, the 2021 National Planning Policy Framework is an update of the previous policy. The policy changes incorporated within the updated NPPF are not considered to significantly affect the merits of the original planning policy assessment. The Government's Net Zero Strategy builds on current waste and energy policies. It does not identify major policy reforms in the energy from waste sector. And officers are satisfied that the policies and recommendations of the strategy have been appraised in the original emerged decision. The planning appraisal of the emerged development referenced draft legislation incorporated within the Environment Bill. There has not been a significant change to the Environment Bill as part of its enactment into law through the Environment Act 2021, insofar that it is relevant to the assessment of the emerged planning decision. The Government's consultation on the review of the National Energy Policy Statements is a consultation document seeking to update existing policy. While the review is undertaken, the current suite of National Energy Policy Statements continue to form the basis for any development decision. And a number of representations have been received from interested parties since the emerged decision, but these submissions do not raise any significant new issues of substance. Officers are therefore satisfied that these documents either do not raise matters which have not been identified and assessed within the original committee report, or include new information which could lead to a different conclusion being reached in terms of the assessment of the plan application. Over recent weeks, the Council has progressed its new joint Nottinghamshire and Nottingham Waste Local Plan, and alongside this published a Waste Needs Assessment report prepared by Aecom, which forecasts the amount of waste produced in Nottinghamshire and Nottingham area, and from this data projects the capacity of any new waste management facilities likely to be required. Since these are entirely new documents, their content has not been referenced or considered as part of the original emerged planning assessment. The new draft Waste Local Plan is at an early stage of preparation and has not completed any public consultation. Government policy incorporated within paragraph 48 of the National Planning Policy Framework advises that very limited weight should be given to policies in emerging plans. It is therefore concluded that the publication of this new draft Waste Local Plan does not materially change the original planning merits of the planning assessment, and there is not a need to reassess the planning policy merits of the decision at the present time. In terms of the Aecom Waste Needs Assessment, this document incorporates projections of waste horizons and needs in future years in the Nottinghamshire and Nottingham area. It would have been a material consideration and appraised in the emerged planning assessment had it been available at the time the committee report was published. In particular, it is noted that one of the scenarios modelled in the Aecom report projects that there could be an oversupply of energy recovery capacity in 2038, even without the emerged facility being built. Given the importance of need for the emerged facility in the assessment of the planning merits of the proposed development, the conclusions of the Aecom report are considered to be a material consideration in the authority's planning assessment, and thus officers wish to make members aware of this document and provide members with advice of its implications to the decision they originally made at the June committee. In providing this advice, officers have noted that the Aecom waste needs assessment has used different methodologies and assumptions to that which we use to inform the emerged planning application assessment, specifically in terms of waste growth and future treatment options. These assumptions are currently subject to consultation and examination as part of the wider waste local plan preparation process and may be subject to change as a result. Members are therefore advised that the weight given to the Aecom report's conclusions should be tempered accordingly. Paragraph 39 of the committee report summarises where there are differences in the assumptions and scenarios between the Aecom assessment and the evidence base that informed the emerged planning application in terms of the proportion of waste being recycled, the quantity of waste sent to landfill, the potential to use a proportion of construction, demolition and excavation waste for recovery instead of landfill, and the calculation of the level of available existing capacity to treat mixed residual waste streams. If these different waste assumptions and scenarios were applied to the Aecom assessment, the conclusion it reaches would be significantly different. The original appraisal of the emerged facility acknowledged that there were uncertainties regarding the quantity of waste requiring treatment over future years, and therefore, when reaching a conclusion regarding the weight that the planning authority should give to need for additional recovery capacity to manage Nottinghamshire and Nottingham's waste, it was concluded that the level of policy support was moderate rather than substantial. Whilst it is acknowledged that the Aecom waste needs assessment provides a further demonstration that there is a level of uncertainty regarding the exact level of any waste management capacity shortfall in future years, this update report identifies the reasons why there are differences in this data. The National Planning Policy for Waste does caution against spurious precision in waste forecasting. Officers therefore consider the Aecom assessment does not materially change the original conclusion reached in terms that there is a need for additional energy recovery capacity to treat Nottinghamshire and Nottinghamshire's waste and policy compliance with Waste Core Strategy Policy WCS3, but it is acknowledged that the conclusions of the Aecom report may indicate the level of capacity shortfall may be lower. The original appraisal of the emerged development acknowledged that if the size of the waste shortfall was smaller than projected, the emerged facility would seek to manage waste originating from outside Nottinghamshire, where it was concluded that there were shortfalls in recovery capacity, which is confirmed by the continuing reliance on landfill disposal and waste exports out of the country to manage residual waste streams at a national level. In terms of additional representations, since the publication of the update committee report, the Council has received a further 4 email representations from interested parties. I'm sorry, I think that should be, I'll just check those numbers. I think it is 5, isn't it? Yeah. From Nottinghamshire Friends of the Earth, Monica Palace, who is speaking at today's committee meeting, and a Nottingham resident, which have each been circulated to members of the planning committee. A 4th email from United Kingdom with UK Win, who are also speaking today, has been sent direct to planning officers, and a fifth email has also been received, which has been sent to planning officers. The supplementary representations request members give consideration to the updated planning policy and information which have been published since the original planning committee, which objectors consider change the original planning balance towards a refusal planning permission. The publications identified in the supplementary representations comprise of the publication of the new draft Nottinghamshire Waste Local Plan. Specifically, it's revised data on waste horizons and treatment, which indicate there is an overcapacity of energy from waste facilities in the Nottinghamshire area, and therefore there is not a need for the emerged facility. The energy recovery capacity gap in the plan period identified in Waste Course Strategy Policy 3 is covered by ongoing contract arrangements up to 2033. The publication of the new Environment Act, which legislates more action on waste reduction and recycling. The government's consultation on the National Energy Policy for Renewable Energy Infrastructure, specifically paragraph 2.10.5, which states that any new plants must not result in an overcapacity of energy from waste treatment at a national or local level. The Committee on Climate Change advice on meeting the 6th carbon budget, specifically the caution expressed by the committee where they state that if energy from waste usage continues to rise unchecked, then its emissions will exceed the Committee on Climate Change pathways for reducing carbon emissions for the years 2033 through to 37, while potentially undermining recycling and reuse efforts. The publication of UK Wind's good practice guidance for assessing the greenhouse gas impacts of waste incineration, which challenged the methodology used for calculating the climate change emissions from development and argue that energy from waste should be assessed as a high carbon, not low carbon energy source. Conflict with the objectives of the proposed East Midlands Freeport, which seeks to be a centre of excellence for zero carbon technology. It is argued that the publication of this new information changes the assessment of planning policy compliance. Specifically, there is not a need for the waste recovery capacity provided by the emerged facility to manage Nottinghamshire's waste, and therefore the development does not comply with Waste Course Strategy Policy WCS4. Compliance with Greenbelt policy was originally demonstrated on the basis of a need for additional recovery capacity, and this represented a very special circumstances to justify inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. Because there is no longer a need for the development, the facility should be refused planning permission on Greenbelt grounds. The emerged facility fails to support the 70% recycling target set out within policy WCS3. It is argued that there is a national oversupply of incineration capacity and therefore the facility fails to comply with policy WCS12. And the development will result in adverse climate change impacts and therefore fails to comply with policy WCS 14. Officers have reviewed these latest representations, noting that the updated planning policy and information which has been referenced within these representations generally reference the same documents which have been appraised by officers and are set out within this update report. And they do not raise new information of substance which would materially change the planning balance, resulting in a different decision in connection with the plan application. In terms of the Freeport, officers have noted the recent announcement by Her Majesty's Customs and Revenues Office, which was published on the 25th of February 2022, and therefore postdates the drafting of the committee report. This announcement relates to the dates for when companies invested in the Freeport can access economic benefits and therefore does not relate to land use planning. The announcement therefore does not materially change the planning assessment of the implications of the Freeport on the emerged plan application set out within paragraphs 456 and 457 of the original committee report, wherein it was stated the Freeport was not given any material weight in the overall balance because it does not have planning permission and is neither identified within the development plan or a designated local development order. Since the date of the original committee report, Rushcliffe Borough Council have undertaken a first round of consultation on establishing a Radcliff local development order, with its aim at developing new industry and business on the Radcliffe-on-Soar power station site following its planned closure in 2024. This local development order is still at a very early stage of establishment, and therefore officers remain of the view that its potential future designation should not be given significant weight in this planning decision. However, officers have reviewed the objectives of the proposed local development order. It does not seek to develop solely renewable energy as suggested by the representations, noting that its aim is to create 7,000 to 8,000 new jobs based around advanced engineering and energy production, including on-site low-carbon energy generation, which the development of the emerged facility would be consistent with. Therefore, in conclusion, the overall recommendation is for members to consider the matters set out in the report, affirm the previous resolution to grant planning permission, and for the development and for members to confirm that they are content for officers to proceed with formally issuing the decision notice in accordance with the previous resolution. Officers have exchanged correspondence with the planning casework unit to confirm whether this planning decision should be referred back to the Secretary of State under the Town and Country Planning Consultation England Direction 2009 in light of this supplementary information. The Planning Casework Unit has confirmed that this decision rests with the Planning Authority. Since the consultation direction does not specifically address the current position in respect to this application, wherein a notification has already been received from the Secretary of State that he does not wish to call in the application, but the Council has reappraised their decision in light of the new information becoming available, officers conclude that the most appropriate approach would be to re-notify the Planning Casework Unit and provide them a further opportunity to review the decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hankin. That was very comprehensive and detailed, and quite rightly so, because it is a very a significant, important application we're discussing. So do any members or officers have any questions of clarification for Mr. Hankin at this stage? No, I don't think so. So this can take us into our opportunity for speakers on this item. And as Mr. Hankin said, we have I think it's 5 speakers for this, and I'm going to ask the committee clerk, Mr. Barker, to read out the instructions and guidance for speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So each speaker will have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak, with the exception of the local member who has 10 minutes. Notice will be given to you when the final minute of your allotted time has arrived by me saying 1 minute. Speakers should not introduce new material, be that plan, photographs or written documents, and only issues relevant to the planning application should be addressed in the presentation. These include impact on local residents and the environment, relevant planning policies and government guidance. You should not refer to non-planning issues such as property rights, covenants, loss of property value or view, and members of the committee may ask you questions for the purposes of clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. So our first speaker is Monica Pallis. And I think you've done this before. You were here last time, I think, weren't you? So as you've heard the instructions, so as soon as you're ready to address the committee, if you'd like to talk to us. Thank you.
Well, good morning, councillors, and thank you for letting me speak. We've been told that to have less landfill, we need more incineration. That's what Uniper and your offices project, and in contrast, the new waste need assessment has forecast that by 2038, we may have overcapacity in energy recovery. You may have noticed that the ranges suggested for residual waste in the officer's report and in the waste needs assessment do not even overlap. They're that different. I was a research scientist, and when I read discrepancies this big, I ask what any scientist would ask. Where is the data? Last November's Environment Act legislated on waste management. So, of course, DEFRA has carried out thorough modelling. Their details indicate that recycling will increase dramatically. Separate food waste collections will happen and will be a huge opportunity to divert up to a third of household waste to facilities for making biofertilizer and biogas, which is just the sort of thing we need for truly sustainable waste management. Your office's report suggests why the waste needs assessment should be ignored. The consultation hasn't finished. The assessment got a few things wrong, maybe. But let me push back. What if the needs assessment is not in fact too optimistic on recycling, but too pessimistic? Their so-called high recycling scenario models 65% recycling in knots by 2038. Wales achieved that in 2020 and has declared a moratorium on incineration. Why can they have that in Wales but not us here? Well, we can, as long as we support the progress set in motion by the Environment Act. And what could go wrong if you allow more incineration? You risk long-term contracts being made that would demand high levels of residual waste, that would disincentivize recycling, including food waste to biogas and biofertilizer. And 65% by 2038 is not even really a high recycling rate. The Climate Change Committee is asking us to reach 70% by 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, as a mother and grandmother, I implore you to give weight to the recent Environment Act, to the Carbon Budget Order and the Local Waste Needs Assessment, and tip the planning balance towards that future for all our children where resources are preserved and don't go up in smoke and greenhouse gases. But if you're not ready to go that far, then as a scientist, I recommend that you commission independent reports to shed light on the unacceptable discrepancies between these local residual waste forecasts. And I'm very happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Well within time as well, so thank you for that. So do any members have any questions or points of clarification for Mrs. Pallis, please, on what we just heard? No. Okay. So, but we have. Thank you very much. Our next speaker was going to be Councillor Jen Walker from Radcliff Borough Council, but I think Councillor Gowland, you're going to be reading out her comments. I think that's correct.
That's correct.
Yes.
I hope you don't mind if I stand up. Thank you.
Okay, yes, that's whatever you're comfortable with.
So I'm partly reading Jen's speech and partly adding some, after having heard the conversation so far. So we're very grateful that you're reconsidering this decision. Opportunities like this don't come around very often. We hope that some of the changes and coverage in the media in the past year will influence your voting today, because you'll realise how it's been seen across the country. What has changed is there's been a notable shift in mood. By agreeing to allow the incinerator in our county, you will be moving against the tide nationally. A tide that has no political colour, but makes sense for the good of public health, the economy and the environment. MPs Geraint Davis and Ian Duncan Smith united in their opposition to the expansion of the Edmonton incinerator. Conservative-led Hampshire Council have just rejected plans for new incinerators, stating there is no need for this plant, and a local farmer adding the incinerator would be devastating both professionally and for our business. A view backed up by the findings of ducks in eggs are 10 kilometres from the incinerators that emit them. Northwich incinerator has been kicked into history, where Councillor Sam Naylor suggested this is an indication of the underlying problems facing the whole outdated incinerator industry, and perhaps an opportunity for LSEP to reflect and pull the plug on this unwelcome, unwanted, outdated and highly polluting project. Cardiff Council rejected plans for incinerator in January, stating there was insufficient need and conflicted with the Welsh Government's waste strategy. I just want to pick up on a couple of things I've heard today. The discrepancy between the forecasts from different organisations and the suggestion that Aecom is maybe being over optimistic in its view of how much waste there will be to recycle, to be incinerated. Aecom is a world-leading company, which apparently, I've read on the internet today, has 13.3 billion professional services income in 2021 and is number 189 in the Fortune 500 company. We can assume that Aecom do know what they're talking about. They're not some pressure organisation, they're a big infrastructure company. So if they're saying these forecasts are going to be too too pessimistic, then they probably know what they're talking about. It was said that if the forecasts are not met and there's not enough waste to burn, we'll be bringing waste from outside Nottingham. Do we really want that? We need to be more ambitious. We need to be aiming for 70% targets for recycling. We need to be spending the energy going into this incinerator, the mental energy going into this incinerator, into improving waste collection in Nottingham so that we can actually have bins everywhere so we can recycle on the doorstep. You have a legitimate right to refuse this plan, and the precedent has been set by others before you across the country, not on party lines, but rather by public opinion. And the necessary evil seeing that it's the evil that polluting, outdating solution that incinerating is. Don't let Notts County Council be an outlier. Let's make this decision for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goland. Thank you very much for that. Do any members have any questions or points of clarification for Councillor Goland at this stage? No, but okay, thank you. And our next speaker is joining us on the line on YouTube. This is Shlomo Doan, who is from, do I have to pronounce it UK Win?
Yes.
It is UK Win, isn't it? Oh, there you are.
Correct.
So, again, as you will have heard, you have an opportunity to address the committee as soon as you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And good morning, everyone. My name is Shlomo Doan, and I have more than 15 years' experience of the waste sector. As you know, planning decisions are a matter of balance, and the weight to be given the various pros and cons is where the committee's power lies. Just 2 weeks ago, an incinerator proposed for Hampshire was voted down by their planning committee, despite their planning officer's recommendation to approve. As one Hampshire County councillor put it, there's simply no need for it. The main focus should be recycling, not burning. Press coverage hailed the refusal as a victory for democracy. You too have an opportunity to take a different view to your officer as to the weight to be given. An incinerator proposed for Greenbelt land in New Barnfield was refused by the Secretary of State, who found that the benefits and disbenefits of the scheme were equal, and because national policy says that the benefits must, quote, clearly outweigh the potential harm to the Greenbelt and any other harm, unquote, the application had to be refused in line with paragraph 148 of the National Planning Policy Framework. I believe this is also the case here, where the benefits of the scheme do not clearly outweigh the disbenefits. Since June, the government has strengthened policy wording intended to avoid incineration overcapacity. New laws have been passed to reduce residual waste, and a consultation waste plan has been published with the evidence base showing how there is already more than enough incineration capacity in Nottinghamshire. New evidence has also been published showing that incineration has a high carbon intensity on par with coal, and so is not low carbon as previously assumed. It is now clear that the proposal goes against the following policies from the adopted Waste Corps strategy, thus providing robust grounds for refusal. WCS 3, because in light of the latest waste data, the proposal clearly goes against current recycling targets. WCS 4, because this constitutes inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, and the benefits do not clearly outweigh the harm. WCS 12, because the proposal does not meet the criteria for treating non-local waste. and WCS 14 because this would be a high carbon development. There is no urgent need for new incineration capacity in Nottinghamshire. There is already around 6.5 million tonnes of operational incineration capacity, and I can delineate that for you if you wish, within a 2-hour drive of the application site, with yet more under construction. It doesn't even count the Shepshed capacity. Refusal is necessary to protect the Greenbelt, to defend Nottinghamshire's recycling ambitions, to support the decarbonisation of the electricity grid, and to stave off incineration overcapacity.
Yeah. Could you be
Make
finishing off,
today
Mr.
a
Dowen,
great
please?
day for democracy in Nottinghamshire by refusing this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dowen. And just it's not quite as easy managing it over the YouTube, is it? But so thank you. We heard you very loudly and clearly, so it all came through clear. Thank you. Do any members have any questions or clarification for Mr. Dowen, please? No. Okay. So thank you, Mr. Dowen. We got that, and we have one more speaker now, who is Mr. Reid, who is the applicant. So you're in the corner there. So have you got a mic? Is there a microphone for you?
I have got a microphone.
So as soon as you're ready, you can address us as the others have done so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you again. I've clearly missed the trick by not lobbying you. Apologies for that. I'd like to begin by thanking the officers for the professional way they've handled this. I think their report was very competent and very thorough. And we agree with them that the new information does not give grounds to change the previous decision. And we don't agree with a lot of the points that have just been made, but I'm not going to go through them now. We're confident that there will be a surplus of non-recyclable waste in the region in the long term. And it does need to be dealt with in a better way, a more sustainable way than exporting it and sending it to landfill. I'd like to assure you that we are doing what we said we would do at the last meeting. We are pursuing carbon capture, which could make the plant carbon negative, although that's at an early stage and does require market changes or government support. We are at a more advanced stage of pursuing heat use at the site, which could make the plant more environmentally friendly than any existing energy from waste plant in the UK. This is part of the wider vision for the site to bring advanced manufacturing and employment, something that will deliver jobs and economic growth to Nottinghamshire. Many of the industrial processes that we're looking at for the site need heat, and using heat from emerge would avoid the need to use natural gas, which is an additional environmental benefit. The vote last year did encourage potential investors to come forward, and we hope to be in a position to make an announcement later in the year on that. But I can't name potential investors today because of confidentiality. I can, however, summarise some of the other positive steps taken to develop the site and to support energy users, industries coming to the site. The first is the Freeport, which this council is a member of. That has just been granted Freeport tax designation, which will take effect later this month, and that will give a strong financial incentive for inward investors. We've got the development order, which Mr. Hankin referred to, with Radcliff Borough Council and our support, which will give outline planning approval. Thank you. It'll give outline planning approval for the whole site, and that also de-risks the site for potential investors. And we've had positive feedback from the first round of public consultation. Finally, the Emerge site does now, as of last week, have approval from the environmental regulator. The environmental permit is now approved. And with the Section 106 agreement also signed, we're ready to progress quickly with the next phase. We see the Emerge Centre as the first step towards our vision for creating a low-carbon future for the whole site. And I believe that you made the right decision last June, and we've made real progress since then. So I asked you to confirm the decision today and allow us to continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reid. And again, do any members have any questions or points of clarification? Councillor Creamer.
Yeah, just clarification on the environmental licence, when it takes effect and what it actually covers.
The environmental permit covers the energy from waste plant as applied for in the planning application, and it takes effect immediately, although it's a permit for the operation of the plant. So,
does that help? Okay, thank you. Councillor Henshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Reid, for that presentation. You mentioned the steps towards carbon capture. Could you expand on that a little bit for me? Explain why it's possibly taking too long. Thank you.
Well, to explain the timescale, there's currently no commercial incentive, no market mechanism for negative carbon emissions for carbon reduction from an energy from waste plant. So we need market changes, regulatory changes, or government support. Now there is a scheme for government support up and running, and Uniper is involved, but I can't say details on that because it's confidential. And it's the government that makes it confidential. But it is a realistic proposition, and the carbon dioxide would be taken by train to the coast and stored offshore.
Okay. Anything else, or you're okay at this stage? Righty-ho. Any other clarifications? Okay, thank you. Well, we heard from Ms. Pallis and Councillor Goland and Mr. Dowen, who were giving reasons for opposing the application, and in considerable detail, in particular around areas such as their concerns about overcapacity and carbon management, as we heard. And then we heard from Mr. Reid, who is the applicant, giving us reasons why we need to support the application. So now we come to the point where we need to open up for. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I hadn't got that on my list. No. So yes, I do beg your pardon. I'm one speaker missing. One of the local division members, Councillor Barney, who, and you're reading it right. So yes, okay. So you're reading Councillor Barney. So Councillor Barney is one of the division members. So you'll be reading his statement. I'm sorry about that. No. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So well.
Right, so this is a statement from Councillor Barney. I'm grateful to officers and members for taking on board comments made by myself and others in respect to the control of HGV traffic movements and retention of the railhead at this site. I would ask that members ensure that these stipulations are not diminished in any way as a result of this supplementary application. All HGV traffic associated with both the construction and operation of the site must be restricted to accessing the A453 via junction 24 M1 roundabout to the southwest and from Silverdale roundabout on the A52 in the northeast. Also, the old A453 used to access Thrumpton and Barton-in-Fabis must prohibit all HGV traffic movements associated with the construction and operation of the facility. I ask again for clarification on how this will be actively enforced and what penalties might be placed upon any hauliers found to be in breach of these planning conditions. The existing railhead must also be maintained to facilitate future access to the site by rail of waste deliveries. The railhead may also play a part in any future operation of the Freeport site. I remain delighted that Notts County Council have declared a climate emergency. With the serious obligation that this brings, I continue to weigh this application, considering the inescapable fact that this plant will produce and emit CO2. Having studied carefully the evidence before us, I acknowledge that this site claims to deliver a net carbon gain of more than 100 tonnes per annum, as opposed to putting the same waste to landfill. If the modelling is to be relied upon, then I accept this net gain. However, considering the climate disaster which we face, I feel strongly that the applicant should be forced to adopt carbon capture measures at this site. I believe that at present, there are still no legislative grounds to achieve this. As national government policy changes to enforce carbon capture, I would expect this to be retrospectively mandated. I would also strongly prefer NCC to continue and accelerate its significant efforts to recycle even greater proportions of waste, so that the need for it to be incinerated or put to landfill is further reduced. I know that my colleagues share this aspiration and will continue to press for this. I acknowledge that as the existing coal-fired power station is decommissioned, if this plant is granted permission, that it will enable jobs that might otherwise be lost in my ward to be maintained. I also acknowledge that as things stand today, this proposal will harness power from waste that otherwise would end up in landfill. Power and heat derived from this site, therefore, would reduce the need to produce that same power and heat from other potential fossil fuel sources. I will be very disappointed indeed if the waste heat produced fails to be utilised by any new facilities, green production facilities created at the Freeport. To my mind, this would be scandalous, and therefore ask if there is any planning condition that can be placed on this application to ensure that the massive quantities of heat produced will be utilised at the Freeport site rather than put to atmosphere and wasted. I have this week been contacted by residents who note that since a previous application, HS2 has been approved and will terminate at East Midlands Parkway. They ask, is this not a significant material factor that should have been considered as part of this resubmission? They make the point that it would not be better to use this land to support the HS2 development rather than for an incinerator, negating the need to take another bite out of the Greenbelt. Thank you for considering these comments, and again my apologies for my absence at committee today. Councillor Barney.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barker, and that was very clear. We can't ask any questions of clarification from Councillor Barney, obviously, but he did raise a couple of questions and points which may well come out in the discussion in the next few minutes. So, so with that in mind, I think we can move on now to discussion, debate, and decision. So.
So, Chair, excuse me, sorry to interrupt. Yeah. I was just wondering whether officers wanted the opportunity to come back on any of the points raised in the public speaking.
Yes. Would Mrs. Gill or Mr. Hankin, are any points you'd like to come back on then? Because we heard some of the points a few times from different sides of the argument. So if you could, yes, come back onto us on those, please.
Yeah. Councillor Barney asked a number of questions in his presentation. I've tried to cover them as quick as I can. In terms of lorry routing, I can confirm that we now have a signed Section 106 agreement which will regulate the lorry routing as requested by Councillor Barney. In terms of the sanctions on that, basically it penalises the driver and the company. If there's repeat offences, they get suspensions, and the drivers will not be allowed to the drivers and hauliers will not be allowed to deliver waste to the site. So it is an enforceable agreement. It also regulates the retention of the railheads feature as well for future use. Carbon capture, there is not a legal requirement to have carbon capture on new energy from waste plants. That policy stance is most recently confirmed by central government in their consultation on the National Planning Policy Statements for Energy, which is a very recent consultation. That's the law which we have to make this decision based on. In terms of recycling, the amount of residual waste locally available to process within the emerged facility has been calculated after assessing the reduction in volume from improved recycling performance targeted in future years. The planning conditions do incorporate an ongoing commitment for the operator to develop a heat network. And the HS2 team have been consulted in connection with the application. They don't object. They confirm that the site does not overlap with the land currently subject to the HS2 safeguarding direction, and the Emerge Centre would not prevent the HS2 development in terms of its construction, commissioning and operation of the HS2 railway line.
Right, thank you very much. So thank you for the reminder on that. It's helpful. So now we can open it up to discussion and debate and a decision. So who would like to start off on this? Councillor Creamer, are you in? Yeah, thank you.
Pardon me, Chair. Yeah, it's a contentious issue. I will admit I came minded, not predetermined to actually abstain because of certain issues. The problem I've got with it is the actual climate emergency. Both we've actually signed and the government has signed, and within the hierarchy itself, there's our waste plan is emerging and what have you. So it seems like it's a race to get this done before our waste plan, which may have been able to turn it down. So I've got issues with. I've got slight issues with the. There's a number here. I won't mention them all. But we've got some issues with the actual writing of the report with the cut and paste, for instance. I mean, I've got it open on this page already, page 192 for those who want it. Financial comments, which are obviously an extremely important issue in here because we're talking about finance as well as the Greenbelt, as well as the actual environmental issues. So we've got the financial comments, which refers to 646. And 646, Nottingham East Midlands Airport is located approximately 5 kilometres. So actually on a cut and paste, I'm assuming it's cut and paste, on a document of this complexity and this importance, I've got issues with the waste, with our emerging waste plan not being properly considered in it because it's still emerging. But I do have major considerations about the environment and the recycling. It's pretty low within the hierarchy. We should be actually trying to improve the hierarchy, and that's where our waste plan comes in. So I'm actually minded now to actually vote against, because on the financial comments, one of the most important things you can put, refer back to 646 East Midlands Airport, short paragraph west of the application site. So I think at least this should actually be rewritten and actually corrected with one or two of the actual things the actual speakers have actually said about putting figures together that don't actually match. UKW, the UK Wind's actually reported in here as not satisfied with it. I know the officers have mentioned to some extent. So I'd like some explanation on the actual report, the way it's written, why it's written this way. And I would like at least a deferment to have the report corrected on such an important document. I mean, the protesters, the environmentalists, quite rightly have found problems with it. We found some problems with it, and I think for a document of this complexity, it needs to be correct before we can actually vote on it for or against.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Creamer. So yes, the query about the copy and paste, is it a copy of the original report from last year, or is it simply a numbering error? Mike, Mr. Hankin.
Yeah, this is in relation to the June committee report, not the most recent report. I think it is quite simply a typo, this reference to financial implications, and the answer is paragraph 662 it should reference, which is the financial implications. And when this is assessment of financial implications, it's the cost to the council of issuing this decision, and that cost was identified as being, there's a cost in preparing a Section 106 agreement, and the applicant has covered those costs. We've been paid for the preparation of the Section 106 agreement. So the original report did set out the financial implications to the council. I do apologise. It was, the cross-reference was incorrect.
Yeah, I can accept the explanation, except I've got no particular problem with it, but it is an actual public document. And this one needs to be right. This is the one that's actually going to be published. This is the one we're actually voting on. So the public needs to see that we're voting and we literally know what we're voting for. So that's just the issue. So nobody can, these things happen, but it's an important document.
Yes, it is an important document, and it's an important decision where we've got to take, and I think everyone will agree with that. But the information is there in the report, even though the paragraph number was perhaps quoted as different. But as far as I understand, the information is in this report, isn't it?
That's right, Chair. Councillor Creamer, I'm not quite sure. Would you be as good as to explain again what your concern is?
The concern is this is a public document. Under recommendations, page 192, and then you've got constitutional comments, and then underneath that, the final financial comments. And that's referring to the final implications are set out in paragraph 646. Paragraph 646, I'll move the page now, pardon me.
All right.
It's
page
actually
178.
About
Right, yes.
aircraft safety.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think, Councillor Creamer, that a vote was taken on this report, in June last year, and this report is simply has been appended as an annex to the update report just presented by Mr. Hankin. So I think, as Mr. Hankin has explained, it was a typographical error. Perhaps it wasn't one which was picked up at the time of committee, although I would have to check my my notes of that committee. But I think with questions of this manner, we see what is the prejudice. I think the financial comments relate to the Section 106 legal agreement. I can confirm to committee that the County Council's legal costs for dealing with the Section 106 agreement have been paid in full. And any outstanding costs, which in the interim until the agreement is formally legally completed, will be paid before it is completed.
Again, thanks for the explanation. I do realise that it's the issue of it's a public document and it should be correct when it goes out.
I think it would be probably fair to say that that information and corrections, if need be, will appear in the report that comes out of this meeting. And Mr. Hankin, yeah.
Yeah, we have also taken financial comments on the update report, which obviously updates the previous report, and they are reported on page 26 of the current report, and the comments we've received now are there are no financial implications arising directly from this report, and that is an update of the previous report.
And indeed, you have just answered the question I was minded to ask as well, because I could see we're all scurrying desperately through the many pages of this report to find those comments. So for clarification, they are on the white pages of the report. So thank you for finding that. Did you want to come back with anything else on that? Just to
in the current report also there are financial implications on page 62, which also paragraph 62. You can probably see why these paragraph 62. Sorry, Chair. I'll put my glasses on.
Yes, indeed, they are on the white pages, paragraph 62. So they are there, Councillor Creamer, even though it is acknowledged that perhaps the clarity of the paragraph number in the yellow pages wasn't quite as clear as it might have been, but it is a very long report and a lot of information in it. So I hope that helps you and colleagues. Councillor Owen.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I find it enormously irritating that this report, that this has been had to be brought back to this committee after we spent so long, in June was it, coming to a decision and coming to a conclusion. And the only reason that it's been brought back is because it's taken so long to get a Section 106 agreement actually signed. And of course, as we are aware, planning officers can't issue the final approval until that Section 106 notice has been signed. And it's been signed on the basis of exactly what this committee asked for, and I believe what Councillor Barney, who is one of the local members there, asked for at that time and has asked for again this morning. I think really people are clutching at straws to try and come to a decision that they want to overturn the original recommendation. And as a result of it coming back to committee again, in my view, it really, I accept that it had to, simply to ensure that there was no chance of a judicial review. But when you look at the amount of material that's been produced, we've got enough material in all of this to keep the place going for the first year of its life. That's the nonsense of it. But I will pick up just one or two points that have been made this morning, Chairman. We've been told that we've got to vote against it this morning to protect the Greenbelt. Well, technically, that site is in Greenbelt, but most of us, if not all of us, last summer went and had a site visit there. And anything more distant from the Greenbelt, it would be hard to imagine. There was the odd weed coming up between the concrete, and that was the only bit of green. I mean, logic would say that it ought to be redesignated as brownfield land, but I know the reasons why that can't happen. So it is technically Greenbelt, but to my mind and in my thinking, it is brownfield land that needs to be redeveloped. So by approving this application once again, we're not protecting the Greenbelt. By voting against it, it certainly wouldn't protect the Greenbelt. It would leave a huge brownfield site there. And we're told also that there may be by 2038 an overcapacity of this sort of facility. Well, judging from the numbers that they told us were being rejected by other authorities, the last thing that there is going to be is an overcapacity. And in any case, whose figures would you really like to believe? We have a company here that, I can't remember the figure now, but I think it was several hundred million that they were going to invest in this site. A sustainable location and going forward, sustainable jobs for the future. Do you believe a company that's going to invest on the basis of the amount of material that's going to be available for incineration, a company that's going to invest millions and millions of pounds, or others who, by their own admission, say that such calculations are perhaps an art rather than a science? And I think I know who I would want to believe. And we're told that to give approval to this, once again, to this particular facility would disincentivize recycling. Now, are we really being told that if we give approval to this, that the people in Nottinghamshire are going to say, "Oh, I don't need to recycle anymore because it's all going to be burnt"? Well, I'm sorry, I just do not believe that. And Councillor Gowland, I think she's left now, hasn't she? Councillor Gowland wants to have bins everywhere. Well, I have to disagree with her. I certainly don't want bins everywhere. I've got enough with 2 cluttering up the place. I think of the good old days when there was just one, a nice tin one, that the bin men used to come and carry out rather than me having to do the work for them. But those days are gone. No, I don't want bins everywhere. I have seen and heard nothing this morning that makes me want to change my mind from the decision that I made and the decision that this committee made last June. Let's go ahead, let's give it approval, and for goodness sake, get on with it if you get approval this morning, and don't pussyfoot around. Get those jobs in place, get that bit of Greenbelt unprotected, and the new facility that we saw the artist's impression of up and running at the earliest possible opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Owen.
Excuse me, sorry, Chair. Could I just, obviously, just for clarification, that of course, Councillor Gowland was reading a statement on behalf of a borough councillor, and obviously, Councillor Gowland is not in the chamber to respond to any.
With respect, Chairman, she did say that she was adding bits herself. So if it wasn't that bit, then I do apologise. But she read it out, and that's why I mentioned her name.
And also, I will just clarify as well that Councillor Gowland did tell me before we started the meeting that she was only able to stay for that part of the meeting, so she had to go elsewhere. But anyway, that aside, I think we got Councillor Owen's thoughts and comments quite clearly. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if there's a great deal need to come back on any of those, but perhaps a clarification of the timing of the signing. So we're all clear, when we granted the permission subject to the signing of the 106 back in June, had the 106 been signed, say, by a month or 2, or even before the end of last year, and I don't know, we don't know what the delay was. That was for other parties, the applicant. But had it been signed then, we wouldn't be here now, would we? Because it's simply because these 7 key changes or additions to legislation, policy, and so on have come in since, because we hadn't received the 106. But if we had received the signed 106 before these had come in, then permission would have been granted anyway. That is the crux of it, isn't it?
Yes, but I suppose yes, if some of those new pieces of information had come out during the time that we were still preparing the 106, then yes, we would still have to take those into account. And it's the case that whenever members resolve to grant planning permission for an application subject to a Section 106, during that intervening period when the Section 106 is being prepared, we always need to keep our eyes open for any new material considerations. And if there is a need, and we've done it before, if we do need to come back to committee to clarify those points and how they could potentially have affected the decision, then we will always do that. Yes, the quicker we can get the 106 done, then the likelihood is that there'll be less things that could potentially influence the decision. But yes, we do always take those.
And also, Chair, sorry, Mr. Smith, if it would assist also, because I have dealt with the Section 106 agreement on behalf of the County Council, just to explain, obviously, when this committee resolved to grant planning permission last June, it was subject to two preconditions: referral to the Secretary of State to ask whether he wanted to exercise his call-in powers, and completion of the Section 106 agreement. So whereas in normal circumstances we might have had a head start with the Section 106 agreement, obviously it was prudent to wait for the Secretary of State to confirm that he did not in fact wish to call it in at that point for his own determination before progressing the Section 106 agreement. And I would also say, just because of the current situation we've been in, the availability of signatories, but I can confirm that the applicant has progressed this as quickly as possible, as the County Council, and I now have a signed Section 106 agreement, which will be ready for legal completion, assuming that members affirm their original resolution this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful, and I just thought it was important that we were all clear where we were with the timing and the legal side of things. And indeed, there's a paragraph here that says that if we are minded, or we will be doing perhaps more than is necessary to do by going back to the Secretary of State to after a decision is made, to see again if there's any reasons they might want to look at it again. So we are going a little bit above and beyond, aren't we, on this?
Yeah, I think that's right, Chair. I think it's because even though there's no specific requirements in the relevant legal rules to refer back to the Secretary of State, officers have contacted the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, who have said it's a decision for the local authority as to whether it ought to be referred back to the Secretary of State. However, we consider that as we are referring this back to committee with an update, then because this committee's decision-making powers have not been used up, then by the same token, the Secretary of State's decision-making powers under the call-in direction have not been used up, and so we consider that it is the right thing to do to refer back in these circumstances.
Thank you very much. Right, any other questions or comments from Councillor Henshaw?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Obviously, I think it's right and correct that we revisit this, even though it took quite a bit of time for whatever reason to sort out the Section 106 agreement. I mean, in the 10 months or so, or 9 months that have elapsed since we made our last decision, I mean, obviously things have changed, legislation's changed, and people's awareness of these sorts of issues have changed. And in relation to the report, there are some discrepancies in relation to issues that are reported. But when you look at the overall picture, do we as a committee and do we as a council, I think we've acknowledged that there is a problem with climate by acknowledging that there's a climate emergency. So therefore, it's very important that we look at all issues that relate to issues that we can affect in relation to climate change. I mean, this incinerator will have a net increase of carbon emitted in the environment. The although the issue relating to carbon capture is not by law, not a lawful thing. I mean, surely that's something that we should be encouraging further down the line to ensure that there is no emissions of carbon into the atmosphere. Plus the fact all the waste and residual ash and things that are produced by incinerators. I mean, how do we look after that? What do we do with it? Is there a plan to make sure that that ash and residual waste is looked after correctly? Whether or not it's a greenfield site or whether or not it should be redesignated as a brownfield site, I think it's that's sort of a red herring, because at the end of the day, it is a designated greenbelt. It's not particularly green because it's all full of concrete. But I mean, as history's shown us, very industrial sites at some point can be rescheduled, re-landscaped, and made to be green again. So my worry is that we as a council should be encouraging people to recycle their waste. And that doesn't necessarily mean everybody's going to have 5 bins outside their house. And I wouldn't like to go back to the situation where we have a metal bin and dustbin men, because there were all men in those days used to walk down the street once a week and empty the bin. Usually got ash in, because we all had coal fires, into one bin, then they took it off to landfill. We've got a definite commitment as a council, and we should be following up the issue of how much we can help and affect or help to prevent carbon emissions and help to mitigate the issues of greenhouse gases going out into the environment and into the atmosphere. We've said that we acknowledge that there is a problem. We've signed things saying that there's a climate emergency, and I can't, with hand on my heart, say I can follow that decision that this council made by agreeing to a planning application that's going to mitigate that by putting more carbon into the atmosphere. And at the end of the day, we've got to encourage people to recycle. We've got to encourage people to be more sustainable. If we don't do that, the future is bleak for everybody. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Henshaw. Do any officers want to come back on that? In particular, the point about the carbon emergency that we did indeed declare last year, and the impact on that. Just for a little bit of clarification on that, please.
Yeah, we talked about it quite extensively at the last committee, and I think the headline news from officers which we want to raise is that we're disposing, this facility is to dispose of residual waste, and once waste is residual, you have one or two choices to deal with it. You put it in a landfill, or you recover energy from it in what you call an incinerator, this type of facility. You compare the carbon emissions of the two processes, and that comparison, the figures we've got is by treating the waste in this emerged facility would save 106,000 tonnes of carbon of CO2 per year, compared to managing the same quantity of waste in a landfill site. It's better than landfill. The process still does emit a net carbon emissions, and the discussions we had about potential climate change coming in future may capture that. But as I say, at the moment, we are not empowered to legislate that in law in this decision.
Thank you. And as with anything to do with this sort of decision, it's very much a balancing act, isn't it? And that's what we have to base our decisions on. I saw another hand go. Oh, Councillor Camilleri.
Yeah, I'm glad we've had to clear it up and come back, but it's interesting. We keep talking about climate emergency. I'd like to say we've got an energy emergency now. We've got people who are paying a lot of money for energy. It's not going to get any better. And funny enough, I went on holiday last week, and I went to Gran Canaria. It was really nice and hot, and I got back home, and the heating wasn't working. So it was really, really cold, and it took me back to my childhood when it was really cold. And I put it to you that there's going to be some people who are going to be having that in their lives soon, where with electric bills at £3,000 a year. I can't believe it, probably more. So I thought I'll have a look at this. I'm on the plane this morning, and we'll have a look at some other countries, some socialist-leaning countries who do it properly. And I looked at Sweden, Now, Sweden is a place that we hold in great esteem, and socialist as a place to be. So they to 100%, 52% of their energy needs comes from incinerators. 1% of their waste goes into landfill. 47% of their waste is recycled. I think that they're doing something right, and they've got the cleanest air in Europe. So I'm a little bit perplexed. I hear all these arguments and I hear all this. But so why is it that Sweden can get it right and we can't, with the sixth most richest country in the world, we can't get it right? Because it's education. We're in all this, it's education. We educate to recycle, what to recycle, so that can help everybody, and what we can burn and what we can landfill. That's the way to do it. I don't know. I want some proof that incineration doesn't work. If it works in Sweden, why does it not going to work in the UK? Are we different? Is our air different? Is our rubbish different? I don't think it is. The population might be, but all right. But populations, it's still relevant. They still do all that, and they do a good job. And I'd like to know how they can do it. Some proper arguments on why we can't do it. Because we've got to do something. Relying on Russian oil, Russian fuel from abroad, closing your power stations. You can't rely on wind. We've got to do something. And I think that recycling properly, incinerating properly is the way forward. Perhaps, I don't know. We've got to look at it. We can't just keep kicking everyone out on arguments that sometimes don't hold water, and to be honest, are quite confusing, quite complicated. And in terms of Sweden, I'm going to go back to it. They're fantastic, and we ought to take a leaf out of their books and let's move it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Cavalieri. Thank you for the geography lesson and the history lesson. That was very, very helpful. Probably no need to come back on that. Sorry,
Yeah,
I was assuming incorrectly.
Just for confirmation, the facility would generate 43.4 megawatts of electricity, which it would dispatch to the grid. That is enough to power 90,000 houses' electrical load. It's diversified energy and it's base load. It's not subject to variances of wind and sunshine as many renewable energies are, but it is low carbon energy by definition of the government, not renewable. There is carbon emissions from it, but it is classed as low carbon.
Thank you for that clarification. Right, we've had quite a good discussion about this and questions both today and indeed last June. Does anyone else have any other comments or questions, or shall we go to a decision? I don't see any other hands going up. So we have the recommendation which has been moved and seconded on page 26. I better read it out. To consider the matters set out in the report, affirm the previous resolution to grant planning permission for development, and confirm that the committee is content for officers to proceed with formally issuing the decision notice in accordance with the previous resolution. So that's the recommendations we have on the report. Can I have a show of hands for those in favour of the recommendation, please? 7. Those, anyone against? 2 against. And for the record, any abstentions? I don't think there were any abstentions. So the numbers were 7. What do we count them? 7-2. No, 9. I beg your pardon. 9-2. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The recommendation has been voted 9-2, and thank you for your input, and also thank you to officers and also to our visitors, our guests today, who all made your points very clearly indeed, both speaking and in writing. So thank you. Right. So are we ready to? Just before we go, the reason for the delay is we have a couple of speakers due for this next item, and we're just trying to find them. So that's hence the reason for the delay. We'll be up and running again in a moment. We've just lost one of our councillors. And another one. Two. Right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for the delay, but just finding people as we do. So we go on to our second application now, and this is variation of conditions for the multi-use games area, the Mugger at Carlton Digby School. I'll formally move the recommendations on page 240 of the agenda. Do I have a seconder, please, Councillor Fielding?
I'll formally second.
Thank you very much. And we go on to Mr. Marsh now, who will lead us through the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report considers two planning applications for the variation of conditions attached to grants of planning permission at Carlton Digby School to allow the use of portable floodlights to facilitate year-round use and an additional hour of use on Sunday mornings on the school multi-use games area. Carlton Digby is a special educational needs school, and the multi-use games area is provided on the western side of the site. As part of the school redevelopment granted planning permission in 2011, there was a requirement to enter into an agreement to allow community use of the multi-use games area. Although the community use agreement has not yet been entered into and approved for planning purposes, the facility is being used by the community. Westdale Junior School, now an academy, administer the letting of the multi-use games area on the Carlton Digby School site. The slide on the screen shows the position of an externally accessible toilet. However, its correct position is shown on this slide. In 2011, permission did not provide for the lighting of the multi-use games area. So whilst the permission allows the use of the multi-use games area between 9 AM until 9 PM on Monday to Saturday, and from 10 AM until 6 PM on Sunday, public and bank holidays, in the absence of lighting, practical use of the facility has been limited to the hours of daylight. Westdale Junior School is letting the facility to Mapley All-Stars, who offer community-based football across a wide range of age groups, including adult sessions in the later evening. In providing that facility, Mapley All-Stars are using portable LED lighting, which is at variance with the approved lighting scheme for the site. Planning permission is sought for the variation of the approved lighting scheme to allow the multi-use games area to be lit using these portable lights, thereby allowing extended use of the Mugger during darker months within the already permitted hours. The use of 12 lights is proposed, 6 along the length of each side of the multi-use games area. The lights can be raised to a maximum height of 3.6 metres, are portable with a 1 minute setup, each being retracted to fit in a 1.1 metre long carry bag, and are removed after each evening session. The lights are powered by a lithium-ion battery, which can be charged by mains electricity or a 12-volt car charger. The lights have been assessed in position to provide a lux range of 31 to 73 lux across the playing surface, with an average 53 lux across the surface. With the lights facing towards the playing surface, the lux level at a height of 2 metres at the boundary of the school site fronting Digby Avenue ranges between 0.45 to 1.08 lux. This image shows the impact of lighting when viewed from Digby Avenue. The lighting is considered to be not noticeably brighter than the external lighting at St Andrew's House adjacent. The facades of buildings pictured are being lit by their own external lighting, not the proposed task lighting. Lighting would allow the surface to be used until 9 PM throughout the year, not just the summer months, and so the same activity, comings and goings, and noise as already experienced during summer months would be replicated throughout the year. It can be reasoned, as set out in the consultation response from Via Noise, that the impact on residents nearby may be less in the darker, colder months, as residents are less likely to be outdoors or with windows open. The lighting of the multi-use games area was not a matter proposed in the original application, and this application allows the impact of lighting on residential amenity, particularly the impact on St Andrew's House to the west, to be considered. Although not condoned, the fact that the lighting has been being used since September 2021 allows the actual rather than theoretical impact to be viewed. It is noted that no representations have been received from either residents or the management team at St Andrew's House. A number of representations received object that the proposal would increase noise, activity and traffic going to the site in hours of darkness and detract from residential amenity during darker months. Bad language being used by adult users is a noted concern, as is inconsiderate parking making it difficult to access properties. Officers have, however, observed that in addition to the usual zigzag yellow lines outside the schools, residential properties close by have white H-bar lines across dropped curbs adjacent to their driveways. The second proposal is to allow the use of the multi-use games area on a Sunday morning from 9 AM rather than 10 AM. The multi-use games area was being used from 9 AM in breach of the variation of condition approved, permission approved in 2018 and was brought to our attention through a complaint. But unauthorised Sunday morning use has not taken place since September 2021. Properties on Digby Avenue have off-street parking, and there is adequate on-street parking available in proximity to the school. The proposed additional hour of use would attract traffic, activity and noise to the site earlier on a Sunday morning, but there would be significantly less traffic associated with use of the multi-use games area than that experienced on a school day. A number of representations received object to the earlier the earlier Sunday start would lead to increased traffic earlier in the morning, activity and noise impacting on residential amenity by eroding the tranquility of a Sunday morning. The relevant planning policy is policy LPD 32 amenity in the 2018 Gedling Local Plan, which seeks to safeguard against adverse impacts on residential amenity with matters such as noise, the level of activity on site, traffic, visual amenity, and other forms of pollution such as lighting being relevant to these applications. The text supporting the policy seeks to define more clearly what is meant by amenity and clarifies that this does not mean that there will be no impact, with the degree of impact to be a matter of professional judgment informed by technical consultees, with the use of conditions or other forms of mitigation to be considered to reduce any impacts. The amount of traffic and level of activity associated with the use is considerably less than that associated with the schools. Low levels of on-street parking have been observed outside of school times, and there is adequate on-street parking available for site users with the H-bars in place outside residents' driveways. The proposed earlier Sunday start would be consistent with weekdays and Saturdays and is considered would not give rise to significant adverse impact, which is the test set out in policy LPD 32. Appropriate safeguards are recommended in conditions. Different sports or activities may require brighter lighting, but recommended condition 10 would restrict the use of lighting to that which is being considered in this proposal in terms of its height and surface luminance, and would also require the lighting to be switched off when the multi-use games area is not in operational use. Other operational issues are to be addressed in a community use agreement subject to condition 11, which the applicant is actively working on in consultation with NCC Estates as the site freeholder. The concern of Carlton Digby School that the availability of the externally accessible toilet by non-school users may make other areas of the school vulnerable from a security perspective will need to be considered in the community use agreement, but should be able to be addressed through a fence and gate below a height requiring planning permission erected between a fenced outdoor play area and the school building. Since the papers were published, a number of late representations have been received. Gedling Borough Councillor Andrew Elwood has written stating that he has visited the site on an autumn Tuesday evening to view a session being held between 7 and 8 p.m. to investigate whether a potential all-weather pitch in his ward, not at Digby Avenue, would be compatible with nearby houses. During his visit, he has advised that there was no noise from the football players which he would consider to be disturbing to the nearby houses, and did walk to the frontages of the houses on the opposite side of Digby Avenue to gauge the sound from the football being played, and the noise level was further reduced. During his visit, he did not encounter any bad language or swearing from any of the football players. Mapley All Stars has written drawing attention to the minimal impact of lighting and has emphasised that the lights are removed after each evening session. They currently use the facility for evening sessions on Monday to Thursday, finishing no later than 8:10 p.m. They say to stop using the lights would stop over 750 children and adults being able to access sport each week, having a catastrophic impact on physical and mental health. In addition to football, sessions for weight loss, parent, toddler and girls-only sessions are offered. Free sessions are offered to children on free school meals. They run school holiday sessions for Gedling Borough Council and have recently been awarded runners-up in the Pride of Gedling Awards in the Inspirational Healthy Lifestyles category. The 9 a.m. session has run on Saturday for many years without any problems. The Sunday morning session would outweigh any negatives. Parents are asked to park considerately with respect to neighbours. Mapley All Stars are currently in discussion with Westdale Junior School about being able to use the school car park. In addition, officers have received 25 representations by email supporting the application from parents of children who attend sessions at the site run by Mapley All Stars. The representations have highlighted improved physical and mental well-being, improved confidence, improved social skills, and the improved personal development that they have witnessed in their children as a result of them attending these sessions, particularly post-lockdown. Allowing the facility to be lit would allow access to sport during winter months. The representations also praised the hard work and dedication of Mapley All Stars and the important part they play in the Mapley community. One parent also uses the facility themselves and appreciates the social interaction given that they work from home a lot. Whilst the representations from Mapley All Stars users and parents make reference to how the facility is currently used, a grant of planning permission would allow the facility to be used by other persons hiring the multi-use games area. The late representations expressing support are consistent with advice in the National Planning Policy Framework, which at paragraph 92 explains that planning decisions should aim to achieve healthy, inclusive and safe places, which amongst other criteria enable and support healthy lifestyles. And at paragraph 93, to provide social and recreational facilities that the community needs to enhance the sustainability of communities and residential environments, which is referenced in the consultation responses received from Sport England. Taking all these late representations into account, along with matters considered in the report, it is recommended the Planning Permission is granted for A, the variation of Condition 32 of Planning Permission 7/2011/0268 NCC, and B, for the variation of Condition 11 of Planning Permission 7/2018/1075 NCC, subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh. Do any members or officers have any questions or points of clarification? Actually, I think I've got one, if I may, just for clarity as much as anything. The Mapley All-Stars, are they the only ones who are using this mugger then? And likewise, the lighting that's there at the moment and we're deciding on today, would anyone else, if anyone else was using that facility, would they be using the lighting as well, or would that have to be a separate sort of discussion? Thank you.
Well, as I understand it, Mapley All-Stars are the only party who are currently using that facility, but it would be available to other users within the permitted hours, as they currently are, without lighting. But if members were to approve this application, other users would be able to use it as well. Now, as with lighting. But as the lighting is provided by Mapley All-Stars, so other users would have to provide their own lighting. And one of the recommended conditions does limit the lighting in terms of what can be used to something which is no higher or brighter than the lighting subject to this application.
Thank you. That was just to make it clear in my own mind and colleagues. Right, so we do have speakers on this item. We have two residents who wish to talk to us. Now, are you reading these, or the lady and gentleman, are you doing the?
Well, I think, Chair, I've been asked to read one of the statements, but I think perhaps if Mr. Barker, do you want to just run through the
Yes,
the rules,
the guidance,
please?
Yes,
thank you.
yes. If you could, we'll just read the guidance about how long we have, etc.
Okay, thank you. So each speaker, whether speaking as an individual as part of a group, will have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak, and notice will be given to you when the final minute of your allotted time has arrived, and that will be by me saying 1 minute. Speakers should not introduce new material, be that plan, photographs or written documents. And only issues relevant to the planning application should be addressed in the presentation. These include impact on local residents and the environment, relevant planning policies and government guidance. You should not refer to non-planning issues such as property rights, covenants, loss of property value or view. And members of committee may ask you questions for the purposes of clarification.
Sorry to interrupt. I understand. I think one of the speakers has additional needs, so I think was allowed. The rules allow a slightly longer time. That is the statement which I've been asked to read on behalf of the resident, and I just want for clarification. I think, Chair, with your permission, if I was just planning to read the statements, but I'm saying it may take longer than the 3 minutes, but should be. I understand 5 minutes are allotted. Is that correct, Mr. Barker?
Yep. We'd agree before the meeting that 5 minutes would be allotted.
Yes, that's fine. We're happy with that. Yeah, absolutely. So our first speaker, then, you have up to 3 minutes to talk to us. So as soon as you're ready, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, committee members. In May 2011, the Committee on Granting Planning Permission for the County Council Development of the Digby School and associated mugger felt it necessary to put in place numerous planning conditions. 2 conditions of particular interest were put in place. 1, to restrict the use of the mugger to start at 10 o'clock on a Sunday, and 2, to not allow floodlighting of the mugger. In fact, it was never intended that mugger had floodlighting. The planning consultants Vincent and Gorbin, working on behalf of the developer and Nottinghamshire County Council, stated in their responses to questions raised by Sport England that lighting was not included in deference to residential neighbours. The playing surface would not be artificially lit, and hours of daylight would determine evening use. The reasons given by this committee for having these conditions was to safeguard the amenity that nearby residents could reasonably expect to enjoy. It also ensured that the development did not contravene Gedling Borough Council's local planning development on amenity and also their environment on pollution generating development, as in the lighting, by increasing noise, increasing the activity on site and increasing the traffic going to the site during the hours of darkness. In 2018, when the Digby School applied to increase the numbers attending the school, this committee reconfirmed those conditions. At the same time, in 2018 meeting, it was highlighted to the disgust of this meeting that the development was not complying with existing conditions. Regrettably, they are still not complying. There is still no community user in place 11 years after the development, and they were given 3 months to do it. The condition states the facilities should not be used until this is in place. We have a portaloo on site in a residential environment, despite the fact there's an externally accessible toilet, but nobody's using it. We're a residential area. There should be no community use without it. The county council are policing the county council, and it does not work. We have no enforcement taking place to ensure all the conditions are being adhered to. 11 years of non-enforcement.
1 minute.
I therefore ask this committee to ensure that all existing conditions are adhered to before they make any changes to give new conditions. I'm unsure what has changed since 2011, since 2018, that now enables this committee to contemplate granting permission for floodlighting for earlier Sunday starts to override the previous conditions put in place. What has actually changed materially that now allows you to do that? It couldn't be done in 2011, it couldn't be done in 2018, it shouldn't be done in 2021. These applications should not be agreed just because there's a need. We've heard about Mapley All Stars. There are 2 of them. There's a charity and there's a limited company. They moved to that mugger knowing there was no floodlighting. They were using commercial facilities. They were using Carlton Forum. They were using the new all one down at Carlton School. They've also moved the 9 o'clock session to a commercial facility. There is no need to start at 9 o'clock. It's clear that the objections received that the no resident wants, and it was notable that there was no mention of how many objected, only how many supported.
Could you just be winding up now, please?
How many letters of support from local residents from the mugger were received? None. The residents of Digby Avenue and the surrounding homes, confirmed previously by this committee, have a right that you safeguard our amenity. The amenity that you safeguarded in 2011 and you safeguarded in 2018. And I call on you to safeguard it in 2021. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And do any members have any questions or clarifications for the gentleman? No, but your points came over very clearly. Thank you. The next speaker is the comments are going to be read out by Mrs. Clack, our legal advisor. So
that's right, Chair.
I don't need to tell you the rules, obviously. But
thank you. I'm reading this statement on behalf of a local resident, Nicola, who has some additional needs. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I live on Digby Avenue and have done for some time. I live with my husband and our 5-year-old daughter, Minnie. I rang Nottinghamshire County Council Monitoring and Enforcement Planning Team on Monday, the 26th of July 2021, regarding the mugger and the breaches of the planning permissions. I spoke with Mr. Tim Turner, who confirmed our conversation in an email the following day. I raised these issues: the mugger being used before the 10 a.m. on a Sunday and use on bank holidays, toilet facilities and the curbside portaloo on Digby Avenue, antisocial behaviour and language, parking issues. Mr. Turner was reluctant to enforce the 10 a.m. start time on a Sunday and on bank holidays in July, as in his opinion a 9 a.m. start time wasn't unacceptable. He was taking the toilet facilities up with the school, but did not state which school. He informed me that antisocial behaviour and language wasn't a planning issue and stated that parking isn't either, but did confirm that these matters had been raised with the school and Mapley All Stars Coaching Limited. I received an email from Mr. Turner on the 24th of August 2021 stating there will be no further 9 a.m. Sunday sessions past the 12th of September 2021, some 7 weeks additional use. Mr. Turner stated that the sessions were a breach of the planning permission but was reluctant again to issue enforcement as a suitable remedy is in place. This is in quotation, and that enforcement action is not expedient at the present time. I rang Mr. Turner once more at the end of September to inform him of another planning breach, the use of floodlights on the mugger. Mr. Turner took the details of the breach and said he would look into the matter. I received an email from him saying that the lights were temporary and non-permanent and in his opinion were acceptable to the use of the mugger. The lights extend the use of the mugger in the winter months, in fact, make the mugger usage from October to March in the evenings. The original planning states that lights were considered and were not installed to safeguard the local residents and the Gedling local plan. Mr Turner has allowed Mapley All Stars Coaching Limited to use the temporary lights from September 2021 through the winter months to date. The men's football brings antisocial behaviours and antisocial language to our quite domestic community. I walked to the Mugger on the 7th of September to ask the men playing football at 8:30 p.m. to curb their noise and language, as my daughter couldn't get off to sleep due to their loud shouting. I could clearly hear swearing and the kicking of the ball at the perimeter fencing, making it rattle and clank. This particular evening was hot, so when we had doors and windows open and the sound the men were making travelled clearly and for some distance. I asked to speak with the coach. I asked the coach politely to lower the noise levels and curb the foul language. I explained that my daughter couldn't get to sleep. The players didn't take to my request nicely and surrounded me, telling me that they pay to play and they could do and say what they, quotation, effing wanted. I felt unsafe and returned home. I rang Gedling Borough Council the next day to support the antisocial behaviour and language. The floodlighting has enabled Mapley All Stars Coaching Limited to continue with men's evening sessions. The language hasn't improved. The football continues to be battered against the perimeter fencing and the noise levels remain high. My only saving grace is as it has been winter and I don't have doors and windows open. I walked with my daughter to the local co-op on Hollyoak Road to get some shopping on a Tuesday evening in January 2022. We have to walk past the Mugger. Minnie asked me what, quotation, effing arsehole meant. No child should have to hear such language walking past a school. If enforcement was issued regarding the floodlighting matter, the antisocial behaviours and foul language would reduce significantly for all residents, as Mapley All Stars Coaching Limited wouldn't be able to run evening men's football kickabouts, as natural daylight would prevent the usage for the majority of the year. On Thursday, 24th of February 2022, my driveway was blocked by a Mercedes. I reported the issue to Nottinghamshire Police, as it's an offence to block a car on a driveway, and as a family, we needed to go out. The vehicle was driven by a father of children playing football on the Mugger, finishing at 1800 hours. When the owner returned to his vehicle, my husband was met with a barrage of verbal abuse as the police had been called. There's a police reference number. A passing lady with two children joined in the conversation. It transpires they were husband and wife, and both parents had arrived to football training in separate cars. The woman was apologetic, but the man was resolute. He could park wherever he wanted. Mapley All-Star Coaching Limited have instructed their patrons to park further away from the Mugger so as not to cause parking issues near the facility. The yellow zigzag lines outside the entrance exit to the Carlton Digby School are left empty or cordoned off with cones. This forces vehicles further up the avenue, inconveniencing more residents than those immediately opposite the Mugger. One resident who lives opposite the Mugger now parks one of her family vehicles on the roads, prevent access to her property being blocked. The County Council have placed white H bars over driveways near the three schools and nurseries to alleviate access issues, but these are ineffective and cause more problems than they solve. On a rough estimate, Mapley All Stars Coaching are making around £2,500 per week from the children and adult sessions, which the majority of the sessions are run at the Mugger. A private business owned by one man is making £120,000 per year from the misery and inconvenience of the local residents of Digby Avenue, College Avenue and the neighbouring roads in the Mugger vicinity. All this from a county council facility, which Nathan Kenny is paying a pittance for. The Mugger has no community user agreement, which local residents want to use for free for all sporting activities for adults and children in football and hockey, but we can't book the Mugger as Nova Educational Trust has booked the Mugger to Mapley All-Star Coaching Limited for an unlimited time. Nova Educational Trust are not making this application for the benefit of school children or the children who use the Mugger currently. It's been made to increase the commercial activities of Mapley All-Stars. The Mugger was never intended to be an all-round sporting facility. It was intended for school children as student daytime use and occasional community use, as it was when it was a full-size grass football pitch belonging to Arnold Carlton College for further education. I would like to add that Mapley All-Star Coaching moved from Carlton Fulton Leisure to the Mugger to cut overheads and to use the facility for maximum profits. I ask that you uphold the current planning restrictions so I and my fellow residents can enjoy peaceful evenings, weekends and bank holidays like other residents of the county. Thank you again. And apologies for running over.
No, that's okay, and it's perfectly understandable as well. So, very good, quick reading, speed reading there. Normally, we would ask for any questions or clarifications, but obviously we can't on this particular speaker. So we'll open it up now for discussion and debate. And the first speaker is Councillor.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, I think the local resident, Paul, right. I think would be able to answer any questions.
Okay. Sorry, yes, we could do that.
That members have.
I'll revert. So if we've got any, so clarifications and questions, Councillor Henshaw.
Thank you for bringing me in, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I have similar problems in my division in relation to antisocial parking, near to a playing field, not necessarily a mugger, but you know, there are definite problems. Can you confirm that there are T-bars across the various driveways? But as I know that they aren't enforceable, but could you highlight or indicate any more of the problems you have with antisocial parking?
Yeah, there are T-bars. They're there for delivery of school children, dropping off and picking up, as well as for the use of the mugger. They are not enforceable, as you say. They are a total waste of time. You get quoted when it suits a resident that they're not parking on the white bar, even though it goes over where your driveway may be. And we get that on a Monday to Friday with the schools, which is why they were put in originally. We're now getting it into the evenings and on Saturdays and on Sundays. And I don't think because we have it Monday to Friday, saying it's acceptable to have it early on a Sunday is a valid reason for granting something.
Councillor Sam Smith. Is this a point of clarification, or no? We're still on clarifications at this stage. So no other questions or clarifications, just to be sure for the residents. No. Okay. So well, I'll just go back to what I asked earlier on. Then, so all the use of the mugger is the Mapley All Stars at the moment, right? So there's no other users currently. So yeah, is that's.
If that's to me, yes, it's only can be used by Mapley All Stars. We know of one other resident who wanted to do some other football training, and my wife wanted to do some hockey training, and we're not allowed to let it because it is solely let to Mapley All Stars.
Thank
so
you.
That is not true community use as it is intended.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Marsh.
Well, as I understand it from the statement which Mapley All Stars have provided, is that the facility is used by them on a Monday to Thursday, and they're currently using it until a session which ends at 8 p.m. So, you know, and on the Sunday they finish using it at 12 o'clock, so it would be available on a Sunday afternoon within the permitted hours. So there are other available slots, but it would appear that the arrangement which is currently in place, it's being used by Mapley All Stars. And that's in addition, of course, to when the school may want to use the facility as well. So
okay, and
I'll
let
you want to
user. Thank you. And you just want to come back very briefly.
Very briefly to say that might be what they're telling them, but there is no community user agreement in place that makes the school have to comply to do that, and the school only want to let it to Mapley All Stars.
So it's an operational managerial decision they're taking then for whatever reason. Right. We'll open up for discussion debate now. The first hand was Councillor Sam Smith and then Councillor Creamer, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'd like to thank the officer and the guest speakers. On this application, I note that the requests for lighting were not allowed in 2011 and 2018, which you've just heard from the residents. So I am sat here wondering why on earth we're debating it today and what has changed. To be absolutely clear, I am not supportive of the hour change request, and I strongly agree with the concerns raised by residents regarding parking. A change of hours on Sunday would have. It could, it's quoted in the papers, could potentially create up to an extra 60 visits to the site. And that's without a car park. The Carlton Digby School car park is inaccessible to the mugger users, so that will simply just result in more traffic on a residential roads. We've heard a lot today about H-bars. Well, they're pointless. They're absolutely pointless. They're not enforceable. They're pointless. So all we're doing, if this is passed, is throwing more cars onto an already congested residential street and restricting residents outside of the current hours that this agreement's in, and that is just simply not on. Paragraph 9, page 227, states that Mapley All Stars now operate within the current permitted times. So I'll simply ask again, why do we need to change them? Surely their operation changes alleviates the need to change the hours on a Sunday. Paragraph 8, page 227, says a portaloo is available. Again, in my mind, that's absolutely rubbish, because it's my understanding that this is locked and does, in fact, currently prevent the infant and junior school using the site, as is now under the current agreement, because they cannot get infant children across the road and back to the toilet in the school quick enough. So therefore, they're not even using it for what it was set up to do, which in my mind is bonkers. The new applications come with conditions. Again, in my mind, they're totally pointless, because at the moment, condition 11 on the current permission on Appendix 1, page 245, says that the current permission should come with a community use agreement. After 3 months of it being set up, it's now been 11 years and it's still not in place, which again negatively impacts residents and is preventing residents using it for community use, which it's been set up for. So what is the point in having new restrictions on lighting or timing when any user in the future knows that, don't worry, we don't, as a county council, we're not enforcing the current restrictions, and we'll just change them anyway, bring it back to a planning meeting 11 years later, and we'll change the conditions. It's ridiculous. So my question to the officers is, what is being done now to enforce condition 11 on page 245? It's just outrageous. I'm extremely disappointed to see that the divisional members for this area have not commented or attended. But I am minded, for the reasons I've just set out, to vote against this application and encourage the applicant to go back to Westdale Lane schools, get the car park confirmed, get condition 11 of the current agreement set up. Let's see this mugger back into community use and come back and we may consider it. I'm voting against it for those reasons.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. That's very clear. Mr. Marsh, Councillor Smith has raised a few questions there, especially about the length of time it's taking to not even get the conditions in that are in place, so to speak. So, can you help with that, please?
Chair. Well, firstly, just on the point about lighting not being allowed. In 2011, lighting was not proposed on the mugger, and partly that was because of a cost to the school in terms of redeveloping the school. And just as background to that, at that time, Sport England were, in wanting to promote community use, would have liked to have seen the mugger as a lit surface, but they accepted that it should not be lit. I mean, it wasn't within the school budget, and what was not assessed was the potential impact of lighting. And I think the normal expectation with floodlighting of a facility such as this would be something which might have lighting columns, might be in excess of 8 meters in height, and the lighting impact of that could be quite considerable. So there weren't planning conditions which said you can't light the mugger. It just was not part of the application. Of course, the applicant is entitled to make an application to vary conditions of a planning permission to suit what they want to do, and that's what is before us. In terms of the potential extra visits to the school site which might arise from use of the mugger, the amount of traffic which visits associated with activity on that surface is considerably less than that associated with the day-to-day school use of, and you've got 3 schools in very close proximity. In terms of the use of the toilet, in terms of the 2011 school design, there was an externally accessible toilet. And the intention was that for certain users of the community facility, that could be tied into the community use agreement to make sure that there was, they would be able to offer a suitable letting for to the community. I must stress that the community use of the facility is not intended to be a free open access facility. It is a paid for facility. Sorry, but I just made a few notes there. Was there anything else that you wanted to clarify?
Well, yes, actually, I think, Councillor, do you want to come back, Councillor Smith?
Yeah, on your final point there, you're saying about the community use. My point is the community haven't been able to use it for 11 years because there's no agreement in place under condition 11 that we set out for that community use agreement there. So my question is to officers is what are we doing as a council to enforce that, to enable the community to use it for what it was set up for?
So it's the enforcement question.
Okay, thank you. Well, currently we are in discussion with the Mapley All Stars and NCC estates. They are exchanging drafts of a community use agreement to resolve this particular issue. From a planning point of view, in the past, we've not been aware that it has not been used or available for the community. And the fact that it is being used by the community currently, by Mapley All Stars, is a good thing. If the facility was not being used at all and there was reluctance or resistance to it being used, then yes, that would be something of much greater significance. But it is being used. It's not being used in accordance with the terms of a formally agreed community use agreement, and there is some work that needs to be done in making sure that things such as the management, which is very difficult for us to control through conditions on a planning permission, can be controlled through the terms of the community use agreement. So in broader terms, things like what the protocol, I would expect them to have a protocol in place for dealing with things such as the use of bad language. Are they going to have I would suggest something like maybe a 3 strikes policy or something like that, that, if there is persistent complaints or breaches of the terms on which the facility is let, then the school, as the responsible body for letting the facility, could sanction the use of that facility by particular users. But there is active ongoing work at the moment, which is why it's thought that a 3-month period, should planning permission be granted, that realistically that a community use agreement should be able to be sorted out in that time, and that's what's recommended in condition 11.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. I think I do sense some frustration from Councillor Smith and others with the time being taken. But anyway, on we go. Councillor Creamer, please.
Yeah, thank you. Some of Councillor Smith's concerns, things you've answered partly, but you've also raised another question. Was actually the owner of the site is the Westdale School. So I'm a bit concerned as why the actual All Stars are involved in discussions with it. In my opinion, it should just be the owner of the school, and it's up to them to sort out that this user does that user does that. So I'm just a little bit concerned why it's a three-way conversation when it should really be a 2. The thing I was going to suggest, because originally I was going to vote for it, I'm not so sure now, that we've got a mugger in our estate and we use it for the youth club, and we got 6 lights on it, and we used to use the ordinary lights, and we switched to LED, and they do make a massive difference in actually reducing the amount of external light to it. So they're extremely useful for that. So in condition 10, I was going to suggest, with all those conditions on height, etc., because the ones we use, which are plenty good enough, are less than 2 meters high. We extend it less than 2 meters, and that's quite handy. But they should actually be specifically in there, if this gets passed. It should be LED lighting, none other, because of the light spillage. So it just needs. You've mentioned it in the original white paper about that's what they use, but there's not a condition to use LEDs. So they're the 2 comments.
Thank you, Councillor Green. That's very helpful. Mr. Marsh, the LED lights and the 3-way discussion query.
Okay. Well, should planning permission be granted, condition the application itself, in terms of the description of development, is for the use of portable LED lighting. So it would be LED lighting that would be permitted. No, but it is the description of the application. Condition 2 also says that development will be carried out in accordance with the documents supporting the application, which is for LED lighting. And
yeah, I think Mr. Marsh, the description
on lighting says that as well.
So doesn't that just refer to the All Stars, where condition 10 is all?
Well, yes, it does say any artificial lighting of the all-weather pitch shall be of no. Well, it talks about the height and no greater lighting lux impact. So it could be the All Stars, or if anyone else was using it. Well, we know they're not, but if anyone else is using it, that would apply to them, I would have thought.
We can add it into condition 10 that it's artificial. Well, it's any LED lighting rather than artificial lighting. If that's
so, if permission is granted, then yes, we could add that LED clarity in. The query about the discussions that were taking place.
Right. If I'm trying to recall whether or not I said that the community use agreement was being discussed. It's being discussed between NCC Estates and Westdale Juniors they have a lease of the site, although the county council is the freeholder of the site.
I think Councillor Creamer was asking that the user, the All Stars in this case, also seem to be part of that negotiation.
No,
or is
that's what I just wanted to clarify, that the community use agreement would be between the county council and the Westdale school. That would set out terms for hire, and currently that is Mapley All Stars. Mapley All Stars are involved. They are not a party to the. They're not a party to the community use agreement.
Good, that's helpful clarification. Thank you. Right, Councillor Owen, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I have one or two concerns. First, I suppose a more general one. There is a planning permission in place with conditions, and we've been told repeatedly this morning that those conditions have been flouted. And we've also been told that they have been reported, those breaches have been reported on more than one occasion to the planning department, to the enforcement section, and they've been met with a blank wall. They've been told, we're doing nothing. Now, I am at a loss to understand why that is the case. And perhaps outside of this meeting, Chairman, we might have a report on why that has been the situation, because it's totally unacceptable. If we put conditions on, we expect them to be adhered to, and if they're not adhered to, then we expect enforcement action to be taken at the earliest possible opportunity. What we don't expect is for residents who have genuine concerns to be totally ignored and brushed off. I accept there are two sides to every story, and that's why I'm asking for a report outside of this meeting. If I can take you back just a little bit, I was the cabinet member at the time the new Carlton Digby School was built. In fact, one of the last things I did in that administration was to open the new building. We went along there one morning and opened it. And the Mugger facility was provided. And I was always a great believer that things that are paid for out of the public purse, wherever possible, should be used as extensively as they can by the public, by the community. That seemed to me to be a reasonable thing, which I think gained general support. Now, my idea of community use for the Mugger would be for the immediate population surrounding the area, who would perhaps have a little bit of inconvenience with it being there. They would be able to access it and use it as a facility that has been paid for out of public funds. What I certainly would never have envisaged and had in mind at that time is that it would be taken over exclusively by a profit-making football club for their use. And again, that is what we've been told this morning. That certainly, to my mind, is not community use. It isn't community use, and let's not try and wrap it up anywhere else in any other ways. Now, I have concerns about the proposals that we're being asked to approve this morning. First of all, one straightforward one is to add on an extra hour on a Sunday morning. Now, I know very few people go to church these days on a Sunday or regard it as a religious day, but I think even now, many, many people regard it as a day set on one side for family, for it being quiet and not to be disturbed. And one test I always apply to any planning application is, would I like it next to me? And I have to say, at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, I would not like next to me footballers swearing, cursing, and generally making a noise. It would be bad enough from 10 o'clock onwards. And so I certainly would not support it coming forward earlier. The report, as written, has been quite dismissive of any of the problems that those of us as councillors know will exist. Parking, it's a critical thing. It's an annoying thing. And we all suffer from problems at our local schools. And to say, well, when the mugger is being operated outside of school hours, you'll actually get less traffic than you will when the schools are working, is no answer whatsoever. I always try to console people when they complain about parking outside of schools and say, well, it really is only for about half an hour in the afternoon. You know, if you live near a school, you can expect it in this day and age. Well, I think that is what you do expect, perhaps, when you live next to a school. But you don't then expect it to go on for many, many hours in the day and at the weekend and at bank holidays and at school holidays. Oh, but it's at a lower level. It's not quite as bad. And it's already been stated, the H-bars, they do work in some cases, but people are getting more and more aware that they do not have the force of law and they just do as they please, and it is extremely unpleasant, and I don't think it's acceptable. I am not prepared to support this application. I think residents do have a right to enjoy their properties without disturbance. It's not being used in the way that I certainly, as the cabinet member at that time, envisaged. And I don't normally refer to human rights implications or the Human Rights Act, as you might expect. But it says here on page 70 that members need to consider whether the benefits outweigh the potential impacts, and reference should be made to the observation section above in this consideration. Well, I do not consider that the benefits outweigh the potential impacts. They're not potential impacts, they're real impacts that are occurring now, and I would say I am going to vote against the recommendations, and if the majority of members agree with me on that, I hope first thing this afternoon we'll start enforcement action to ensure that they are operating within the approved planning permissions that they've got now.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Very, very clear, very succinct. Do you want to come back on any of those, Mr. Marsh? I'm not sure. Yep.
Councillor Owens referred to, I suppose, the possibility of there being swearing on the Sunday morning. The way in which it is currently operated, there are children's sessions being operated in the morning, the adults operate in the afternoon, but that's not to say that adults could not also use that facility on a Sunday morning. We would not be able to control that. The other thing is that the hours are already permitted. It's just in terms of activity going on until the evening, that is restricted to summer months or lighter months only, where lighting is not required. The facility can be used at that time. They can be used. Correct. Yes. So the parking which is associated with that activity can take place in the summer, but would not occur if there were no lights.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh. My next speaker is Councillor Henshaw, please.
Thanks, Chair, for bringing me in. When I originally read this application, I was veering in favour of supporting it because I think we all want people to participate in sport and do activities that are beneficial to the health. But on balance, I think some of the problems that would arise in granting the additional points would lead to more disruption and more problems for the residents of Digby Lane. In particular, the antisocial parking, and as I have mentioned, I have this problem in my own division, and I fear that if we do pass this today, we will be putting more problems in place for the people that live there, who already have some considerable issues with the people that use the site. So I'm veering on the side to actually refuse this point in the papers today. The other issue, as the old chestnut that I always raise in relation to lighting, Chair. Obviously, we all know that external lighting can be deemed as a form of pollution, and as Councillor Creamer indicated, and the officer possibly said, that we could recommend, if the planning application went ahead, the lighting would be LED lighting that would reduce the amount of light pollution for the area. But at the moment, I'm veering on the side to not support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henshaw. Well, of course, you're making a point that we all follow, in the fact that we come onto a planning committee meeting with an open mind, and we've all read the reports, and then we hear the discussions and comments from people in favour or people explaining, people against. At the end of the day, we're here to make a decision, and it's very, very important on this committee that we all do have our open minds, and that's why we're here today, to listen to arguments for and against. So you've made that point very well. Did you want to come in, Councillor Fielding?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as I say, having read the papers and listened very carefully to everybody's contributions, I don't feel I can support this. Certainly would be very against granting an earlier Sunday and compounding the problems that the community is facing. I must say I'm somewhat disappointed with what community involvement we've got on that site. There's a monopoly of one organisation using it that isn't from that. Well, there may well be children from around that community, but if they are having to be transported in, it is a concern, and I would have hoped that the school would work with the local community to ensure that there is usage also from local residents.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fielding. Does anyone else wish to come in on this item? No, I don't see any other hands going up. Well, I have to say that the comment about bad language, whether it's on a Sunday or any time, really is it's not acceptable. But I suppose in the heat of football games, you get it, and it's not acceptable, especially on a Sunday morning. And also, I'm sure that we all know that even when children's games are taking place, the children may not be swearing, but certainly parents and others at the side of the pitch will be, and that, I think, is a sad sign of the times. So there we are. That's my 2 penneth worth, and also I have some sympathy with the comments about the 11 years and the length of time it's taking to get enforcement taken. And I also pick up on Councillor Owen's point about perhaps asking for a little bit more information away from this meeting, and I'm sure we will follow that up. So, with that in mind, I don't see other speakers. I think we need to come...
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mrs. Clark. Yeah.
It was just to say that obviously this is a application or applications for variation of conditions on an existing planning permission, and there is a recommendation in the officer's report in favour of granting planning permission. But if members are minded to vote against that, then obviously we have to be and refuse planning permission. Then I think we might need to take a moment for if members to take legal advice or just to consider the best approach. I would also add, with this being I understand, and perhaps Mr. Marsh will confirm, this is a Regulation 3 application, which means that there is no right of appeal for the applicant to the Secretary of State on refusal. Now, if I could, so I'm just wondering whether a solution might be, because obviously I think in refusing the application today, that would not stop the use, and it would not stop the issues experienced by local residents. It would obviously the extended use and the lighting would exacerbate that. I think when the original planning permission was granted, it was envisaged that the community use agreement, which was required under the as a planning condition, would be the mechanism to deal with those amenity issues, such as the use of bad language. Now, for whatever reason, that agreement has not been completed, although I understand from what Mr. Marsh has told us that discussions are ongoing. And I would be wondering whether it would be an option for this application to be deferred, and in the interim for that community use agreement to be completed and this report back to committee. Obviously, that is only a suggestion. This committee is a decision maker, but it was just to explain what's the legal perspective.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Well, I think you've just said it. This committee is a decision maker, and we are here to make a decision. So, and I'm getting distinct body language from colleagues here who are, I think, feeling rather strongly about this. I understand completely that if we decide not to give permission, that we need to give a reason for reasons of whatever. And yes, we perhaps do need to have a little discussion about the precise wording of that. That's if we get to that point. We may not have got to that point yet. We'll just have to wait and see. Am I right in that?
Yes, yeah, that's correct, sir. Yes, it was simply to point out, because obviously they're just trying to think the kind of the best solution, because obviously I think things what the some of the amenity issues which we've heard about today perhaps would in my view would be resolved by the community use agreement.
But the point is, the recommendation is very, very clearly with recommendations here: planning permission granted variation, condition 32, etc., and recommendation B. That's what we're voting on today. So that's the key important point. So does anyone else wish to come in on this, or shall we go to the vote? Right.
I'll just say, Chairman, I think they can bring another application, and it can be more amenable, and they can mitigate some of the problems that we've heard about.
That is a distinct possibility. So we've had a long discussion on this. It goes to show the importance of a planning committee, doesn't it? You go from one very big multi-million-pound building to something that is of concern to residents in a community. So we've got the recommendations before us on page 240. Can I have a show of hands for those in favour of the recommendations as they are before us? I don't see any hands going up. Do I see any hands going up against the recommendation? So I think that's unanimous, isn't it? So what perhaps we need to do now is agree some wording for reasons for refusal. Is that what we need to do? Or,
yes, well, I think it would be on general reasons from listening to the debate would be grounds of amenity.
Support, Councillor.
Yep, good. So so that's it. The recommendation is refused. So permission is refused. But thank you everybody for thank you officers and our visitors for your contributions. Thank you. So we'll move on to our next application now, which is I've just lost my notes. Here we are. I'm writing so many things down, I lost my piece of paper. So this is variation of conditions for a waste recycling facility at Snape Lane in Harworth. I will formally move the recommendations on page 267. Do I have a seconder, please, Councillor Fielding?
I'll formally second that.
Thank you very much. And we now go on to Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, if you'd like to talk us through this, please.
I will do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report considers a planning application for the variation of conditions relating to the site layout at Lunar Waste, Unit C6, Glassworks Way, Snape Lane, Harworth. The application site is a metal waste management facility located on the eastern edge of the Snape Lane industrial area in Harworth. It has been operational for around 6 years since an original grant of planning permission in July 2015. The application site extends to approximately 0.8 hectares. The waste site is adjoined by industrial land to the west and south, and Lordswood to the southeast. Land to the north and east on the former Harworth Quarry is being redeveloped to be largely residential, with the nearest occupied residential properties located to the north on Brinsley View at a distance of around 150 metres. There are further plans to develop housing close to the site. The approved layout restricted the storage and processing of waste to the developed southeast corner of the site. Since the original grant of planning permission, a new operator has taken ownership of the site and developed the surfacing and drainage of the full site, originally identified as Phase 2, to waste management standard. The applicant seeks full planning permission for the regularisation of the site layout as it is now, using the full site area. The applicant also seeks to vary Condition 13, which restricts waste to metal-bearing aggregates, canned metal scrap and end-of-life astroturf, in order to allow not only metal-bearing waste but also construction waste to be brought onto site. The applicant has confirmed that no putrescible or potentially odorous waste will be brought onto the site. By amending the layout to have no waste storage or processing in the southeastern quadrant of the site, besides a quarantine skip, it allows the safe movement of two-way vehicles through the site from the weighbridge to the storage processing bays on the northern boundary, as shown on this slide, with material deposited in the northwestern bays and working their way left to right on this picture along the processing and sorting line before being exported off the site. One objection has been received from the neighbouring stirrups with Burcoats Parish Council regarding the site's location, the nature of the operations, the hours of operation and vehicle movements. No objections have been received from members of the public. As part of the application, a noise assessment has been conducted to assess the impacts upon housing within 225 metres, as required by Condition 21 of the extant permission. It has been shown that no further noise attenuation measures are needed at this time, but it is recommended that a condition require a further noise assessment upon the commencement of the next phase of housing, which would eventually bring housing to within 100 metres of the site. It should also be noted that the planning permission granted by Bassett Law District Council for the adjacent housing development also includes a condition requiring the submission and approval of noise attenuation measures to protect the occupiers of new homes from noise from adjacent industrial units, with the agreed measures to be carried out in full before the occupation of any relevant dwelling. The proposed variations to site operations are not considered to raise significant impacts to the environment or local amenity, and the proposal accords with strategic policies in the waste core strategy. It is recommended that planning permission is granted, subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1, subject to a minor typo in Condition 13, which presently shows some text which needs deleting and which shall be deleted should permission be granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Do we just want to confirm what would? Oh, yes, it's already got a strike through. Is it that bit that with so it's already been deleted on the papers, but when it comes to the actual kind of right, just blame the computer. Do any members have any questions or clarifications from Mr. Smith? No, we don't have any speakers on this item or any guest speakers. So does anyone wish to make any comments or ask any questions on this application, or are we relatively happy with the application? No. Right. Okay. So, yeah, oh, Councillor Camilleri.
One of my, I was trying to work it out to say it without being overly controversial. You know what I'm going to say? This is another retrospective planning permission. And I know there's all the reasons we would probably pass it anyway. But I don't think that sends the right signal out to people. I think that it sends a signal out, well, we'll do it, and then it'll get passed when it goes to planning anyway. That's not what we want to be saying. We want to know what people are doing. I don't know how you enforce this, by the way, but I think some councils enforce it more than others. And I just don't think retrospective planning permission is the way to go. But that's only my opinion, by the way.
Mr. Smith.
Well, we monitor these sites regularly, and it is through that regular monitoring that we pick up any discrepancies between what's happening on the sites and what's happening on what the operators do. We do encourage operators to, if they want to make changes, that they should come to us in advance. Unfortunately, some don't, but it's through the regular monitoring that we undertake that we are able to pick these discrepancies up and then seek their regularisation, and therefore to bring back, the control of those amendments under the control of the County Council as the planning authority.
Thank you. I do have complete understanding and sympathy with your points, as indeed I'm sure colleagues do. And in previous meetings we've had this, and we did indeed, via the leader, write to the government expressing our general frustration at the law. Planning, because that's what we're working in, is within planning law of retrospective applications, and the leader wrote or contacted the relevant minister at government, and a reply was received along the lines of they are aware of similar comments from around the country and to watch this space, basically. Yes, I got Councillor Creamer to speak.
Yeah, well, very quickly, because you said partly what I was going to say anyway, but totally agree with Councillor Camilleri on this one. The unfortunate thing is the way the law is written. Again, you've mentioned that, but the way it's written is, if it was got planning permission originally, then we have to give it anyway. So that is ridiculous. There should be some sanction that you say, all right, if you don't come through us, it'll cost you 3 times more or something. But there are no sanctions because it's not in the law. Thank you.
Right, I'm conscious that we're straying a little bit from this particular application. So, sorry, Councillor Henshaw. I'm sorry, yes. If we come back onto the application.
It's about lighting again. I'm very interested in reducing light pollution, and I see in the recommendations it's about floodlighting. Can we have assurances that is floodlighting that's going to have a minimal effect on the amenity of people and the environment around there? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henshaw. I'm sorry I didn't see you indicate. And so, Councillor Smith, that's a condition number 7, isn't it? Or can we be confident? Sorry, Mr. Smith. I've committed a terrible sin there. I'm terribly sorry about that, Mr. Smith. Sorry, yes. Right. Any other comments or questions on this one? So, again, you be brief.
The fact is, it's a waste disposal unit. It's quite a controversial unit in itself. So you would think that all planning at those kind of places would be done beforehand, before anything was done. That's what I was going to say.
So, in other words, pre-application discussions. Yes, Mr. Smith.
Which, as I said, we do encourage.
Thank you very much. Right, let's go to a decision on this one. We've got the recommendation before us, which I've just momentarily lost. It is definitely before us here, and it's on page 10267. Such is the excitement. Yes, here we are. So we've got it's recommended that planning permission be granted subject to the conditions in Appendix 1, and we've considered the issues set out in the report and resolve accordingly. So, can I have a show of hands for those in favour of the recommendation? That's unanimous. So, thank you very much for that. And the next item on the agenda is item 8, which is more of a procedural matter, really. This is the requirements of validation of planning applications. So I'll formally move the recommendation on page 288. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'll formally second that.
Thank you, Councillor Fielding. And Mr. Smith again, please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek approval for up-to-date validation guidance on which to validate incoming planning applications. The Council's existing validation guidance was adopted in February 2020 and now needs to be replaced to ensure that the authority has an up-to-date local list against which it can validate incoming planning applications. The government requires that local lists must be no more than 2 years old. Without an adopted local list, the Council can only rely upon the national requirements when validating applications, which comprise very basic information such as the planning application form, the correct fee and minimal plans. This could lead to less comprehensive applications being submitted and possibly less robust decisions being made. The first step involved reviewing the existing list in the light of changes to legislation, national guidance and to some county council procedures. The proposed changes identified were updates to reflect the latest version of the MPPF, including in relation to design, encouraging the electronic submission of applications, updates relating to the GDPR, an update to flood risk assessment section regarding flood resilience, changes to the section on trees relating to the importance of retaining trees and planting new ones, and changes to the biodiversity section to reflect the new biodiversity net change requirements and the need for 3D noise modelling where required. The validation guidance was updated to include these proposed amendments, and relevant consultees were identified, including Nottinghamshire District and Parish Councils, council members, neighbouring authorities, statutory and non-statutory consultees, together with internal and external applicants and agents. The draft document was also published on the planning pages of the Council's website with details on how to make comments. Other Council departments, together with contacts from VIA and ARC, as well as officers from within the planning group, were also consulted on the revised list. The consultation ran for 21 days towards the end of last year, and 12 responses were received. A summary of the responses and the proposed changes to the validation guidance is set out in Appendix 1 to this report. The updated validation guidance, showing all the proposed changes in shaded text, including those made in response to the consultations, which are shown in shaded bold text, forms Appendix 2. If members approve the updated validation guidance, then this will formally replace the version adopted in February 2020. It will be retained on the County Council website and will form the basis on which incoming planning applications are validated. And so the recommendation is that members note the response to the consultation exercise and approve the revised document known as the Nottinghamshire County Council's guidance note on the validation of requirements for planning applications, and that members also authorise officers in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair to make minor changes to reflect any updates to the MPPF and other reference documents as appropriate during the intervening 2-year period before the next validation review, where these do not materially affect the validation document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Do any members know any comment, clarifications? No. My only, it's an observation really. I mean, I can't believe it. Somehow 2020 sounds a long time ago, doesn't it? But goodness me, here we are 2 years later doing this again. And it's interesting to see some of the comments that come in, and the fact that some organisations have at least taken the trouble to respond. Even credit where it's due to two parish councils, Misson and Sutton-on-Trent, who have basically written in saying they're very happy with the proposals, and at least they've made the effort to read them, and so that's to be commended. So, any questions? No, we'll move to a vote on this. So, can I have a show of hands in favour of the recommendation as on page 268, and which I don't think I need to read out. We're all in favour. Yes, that's unanimous, so thank you very much. And then on to the final item today, which is the work programme, as we sometimes call it. It's the progress report of applications which I think I need to move. So I will formally move that. It's on page 322. Councillor Fielding, please.
I will formally second.
Thank you very much. And Mrs. Gill, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As members are aware, this report sets out the schedule of the applications that we've received into the team and the ones that have been determined whether by this committee or under delegated powers. And officers will be very happy to talk to members outside of this meeting on any of these applications. But I would draw your attention to the fact that since these papers were published, the planning application for sand and gravel extraction at Barton in Favis has been withdrawn. And at the end of last week, I think Jonathan sent you all an email on that matter. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Yes, indeed, we did receive notification of that. Mrs. Gill, sorry, it's my eyesight, and it's all these Smiths again. Sorry, Sally. Sorry. This is how rumours start, isn't it? So sorry about that. But yes, we did receive notification of the withdrawal, and I'm sure we've all read the comments from the applicant, but as and when there may be another application coming in. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the items in the list? No? Okay, so thank you, Mrs. Gill and Mr. Smith and Mr. Marsh for your inputs today. It's been an interesting meeting, very, very mixed and diverse, but I do thank you for your contributions, and we will be meeting again whenever the next meeting is, which won't be as long as the gap between the previous one and this one. So thank you. I'll close the meeting at 12:50. Mr. Smith. Oh, yes. Thank you for the reminder. Yeah, actually, you're quite right. I'd written it in red on my agenda here to remind members. Yes, Councillor Camilleri in particular, but other members in general were very keen to have a site visit to the Ratchet Quarry following the planning applications we've had there. There had been a certain amount of delay and, dare I say, frustration raised from members, but we were delighted to have a response. Thank you to your persistence with them. So we have now been offered 2 potential dates for visiting. I think it's the 24th or the 25th of May. Hopefully everyone's received an email. Could I please encourage you to respond, if you haven't already done so, please respond and try and get that in your diary, because it actually has taken a lot of effort to get this arranged. Mr. Smith.
Yeah, it was just to confirm that from the responses I've received so far, the morning of the 25th is most appropriate. Well, certainly the 4 who have confirmed they can all make it the morning of the 25th, so I would suggest that as being the date. I'll send a reminder around. And obviously, yes, if members do have time as well, there will be the opportunity to go to their existing operation, which is 5 minutes down the road, which is quite an interesting quarry to see if members want to do so. So might run a little bit into the afternoon if we do that, but we can sort out times and stuff.
Indeed. Well, personally, I think that's a good idea. I think that's the Friday then, isn't it? Yep. It's Friday the 25th. Yeah. If you haven't responded already, I'd be really grateful if you could, because as I say, it's taken quite an effort to get this arranged, and it would be a terrible shame if we don't take up the opportunity. So thank you for the reminder about that. And so unless I've forgotten anything else, we'll close the meeting at 12:52. So thank you for your contributions. Thank you.